Perfect. There we go. Thank you.
Shelley, are there any others joining at this time?
Looks like we're waiting for 3 members. I'm looking for them now to see if maybe they've popped in.
All right.
Do not. Oh, I see one. Stand by. And good morning, Member Rich. I've promoted you to a panelist. If we could do a microphone check and a camera check, please. And Member Tykert, I promoted you to a panelist. If we could do a microphone check and a camera check.
Here's a microphone check. Can you hear me?
I can. And I can see you. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks.
And Member Rich, if you can hear us, if we could do a microphone check and a camera check, please. It appears that maybe Cindy cannot hear us. Can staff reach out to her and see? Maybe she's having some audio issues.
Hello.
Oh, there we can hear you.
Yep, I'm here. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Now we can hear you and see you. Thank you so much. So Chair Granzella, it looks like we're only missing 1 member at this time.
Are they logging on at this time?
I do not know. I haven't heard from them. It's Member Altamira.
Dave, can you reach out to Mr. Altamura?
Yes, I'm calling Frank right now.
All right. Well, I think we should get started. Shelley, feel free to do your checks with him as we proceed.
All right, and one quick check. I do not have the host role, so whoever does, if you can begin the recording, please.
Says
All right, looks like we have
Shelley, I
recording.
have started it.
Okay,
All
thank
right,
you.
if I might, Dave Fote did speak with Frank, and it's my mistake. He does have an excused absence today.
Oh,
Frank Altamara has an excused absence.
all right.
It's
All right.
okay.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you for checking on that. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. The time is now 9:04. I call to order the November 29th, 2021 meeting of the Contractor State License Board. I'm Susan Granzella, and I am CSLB's board chair. Board members, we will be using cameras during the meeting. To mitigate any potential bandwidth issues, we ask that you turn off your video camera when you are not speaking. When you would like to comment during the meeting, please turn on your camera or select the raise your hand icon in the WebEx application. I will call on board members to speak. When called upon, please unmute yourself, and when finished, return to mute and turn off your camera. Shelley Jones is again our host and moderator today. Also joining us is Registrar David Fote, Chief Deputy Registrar Tanya Corcoran, CSLB staff, and our board legal counsel, Jason Hurtado. DCA Deputy Director of Legal Affairs, Ryan Marcroft, Supervising Deputy Attorney General Ryan Ryan Markoff, and Deputy Attorney General Carter Ott may also be in attendance. I believe Joshua Rome is may be in attendance. So Kayla, Mr. Altamura, Board Member Altamura has an excused absence. Please confirm board member attendance and call the roll. And Dave, can you check if Kayla is
Yes, we'll do that.
having difficulties?
Yes.
Okay, Susan Granzella,
Here.
Frank Altamura, excused absence, Rodney Cobos,
Here.
David De La Torre,
Here.
Miguel Galarza,
Here.
Donald Giratano,
Here.
Diana Love,
Here.
Michael Mark,
Here.
Steve Pinelli,
Here.
Cindy Rich,
Here.
James Rain,
Here.
Johnny Simpson,
Here.
and Mary Tykert.
Here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I would next like to introduce Board Member Mary Tykert to conduct the Pledge of Allegiance. Mary?
Thank you, Susan. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mary. Before we move to our first agenda item, I would like to give our two new board members a moment to introduce themselves. Cindy Rich and Steve Pinelli are joining us today for the first time, and we'd like you to say a few words about joining the board. So Cindy, would you like to go first?
Hi. My name is Dr. Cynthia Rich. I'm a licensed psychologist in the state of California, and I'm thrilled to be part of this CSLB board. I went through a lengthy process this past year, including interviews with some very interesting people within the governor's administration. And I felt very supported since joining on October 8th by Dave and his staff and Susan. And I really look forward to just being part of this team and being able to share perspectives that I have and just make a difference in any way I can. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy. Steve, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, my name's Steve Pinelli. I'm the Chief Plumbing Inspector in the City and County of San Francisco. I've been in construction my whole life since I've been 18 years old. Looking forward to working with the board, making contributions, and hopefully making changes where they are necessary. If anybody needs anything, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And on behalf of the board, I want to welcome you both. We next move on to B, public comment for items not on the agenda and for future agenda item requests. So moving to item B, the board values public input as part of our consumer protections mission. To allow us enough time to conduct our full schedule of business today, I'm limiting public comments to 3 minutes apiece. If your comments don't involve an item on today's agenda, this would be a time when you can make them. If you have comments on one of our agenda items, we encourage you to wait until we get to that item. We will give you an opportunity to make your comments at that time. We also ask that your public comment relate to the agenda item currently before the board. There are a few other rules that apply. First, California law prohibits board members from discussing any matter brought up during public comment, and board members are not allowed to act on any item not on today's agenda. Second, if you want the board to discuss a topic not on the agenda, you can ask us to consider placing that issue on the agenda for the future meeting. Finally, if you have an application, complaint, or disciplinary charges pending before the board, we ask that you not discuss the details of your case or pending complaint. That's because board members may be the judges, and by law, we are not permitted to receive evidence or information that is not part of the administrative record in this case. Members of the public, if you are with us on WebEx and you would like to make a comment, use the chat feature to send our host a note that you would like to offer a public comment. If you are joining us on the phone and would like to make a public comment, press *9. We will take any WebEx comments first, followed by telephone comments. We will use this same system throughout the meeting for public comment during each agenda item. You will find instructions on how to make public comments on the agenda for this meeting posted on our CSLB website. Board members, please turn off your camera and raise your hand if you have an agenda item placed. I'd like to ask for comments. So board members, please turn on your camera and raise your hand if you have an agenda item that you would like to have placed on a future meeting agenda. All right. Seeing and hearing none. Shelley, please check to see if there are any members of the public who wish to address the board or offer a possible agenda item for a future meeting.
Okay, looking now, and just as a reminder, we are also using that Q&A feature that you can find by clicking on the Q&A icon, which looks like a question mark inside of a square. You would simply type comment into the text box and then submit that to our panelists. I see nothing in the chat. I see nothing in that Q&A box right now, but we do have a raised hand from Mark Smith. Mark, I'm going to unmute your microphone. You will get a request at your end to unmute it. Give it just a moment, and then you can provide your comment.
Yes, hello, this is Mark Smith. Can you hear me?
We can.
My name is Mark Smith. I'm an advocate for the Sacramento Regional Builders Exchange and the California Builders Alliance, which is the collection of exchanges across the state of California. My comment is directed to Chairwoman Granzella. On behalf of the Sacramento Regional Builders Exchange, we want to thank you for your videoed introduction that we were able to display at our 2021 Women in Construction Conference. It was a very big deal for us, and thank you for filling in at the last minute when the Lieutenant Governor had to fill in for the governor to go to Glasgow for COP26, a whole series of events, but we are extremely appreciative. We had over 500 registrants attend our Women in Construction Conference. We actually capped the number because of COVID. We know that we had enthusiasm beyond the number of people we were able to host. We're hoping that in 2022, we might have as many as 1,000 women and others in the construction industry show up for our 2022 Women in Construction Conference. So again, thank you so much. Your invite was well received. I appreciate your professionalism and that of the CSLB staff that helped you pull the video together at the last minute. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It was an honor to be able to address that group, even on short notice. It was a pleasure, and the feedback was great to hear. So thank you very much, Mark.
And with that, I'm not seeing any other requests for comment.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. We are now moving on to agenda item C, which is presentation of certificates of recognition. And today we are recognizing the information technology staff for their exceptional work on this single qualifier project that enables 96% of licensees to renew their license online. This is not on the script, but I did want to add being part of the IT advisory group with board member Altamira. and to see the progress that they made during the year. It was an incredible achievement and benefited the board tremendously. So I'd like to call out a thank you to Jason Perez, Mike Collins, Raju Shah, Wayne Roger, Glenda Takamoto, Bill Schroeder, Peter DeFalco, Arvind Nadaranjan, and Andrea Sisko. You are truly an asset to CSLB, and your hard work is appreciated. Thank you. All right, Dave, the next item on my list here is asking you to say a few words.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Granzel. I'd like to comment on the fine work of our IT staff. They've done a tremendous job in not only making information available for no charge to consumers, but also for what Chair Granzel just discussed, be a little more business friendly, allowing our licensees to renew online and having that done almost the same day in most cases. So that's been a fantastic achievement. I also wanted to add to what Mark Smith said about Susan and her video. I think, as Mark indicated, we were notified on Thursday, November 8th, that the Lieutenant Governor would not be available to make the opening remarks. And I reached out to Chair Granzella, and she was ready to come in and to take on that role. And she came in the following Monday. She did a great job with the video, and as you saw with the opening remarks, and as you heard from Mr. Smith, it was very well received. And with that, I would like to show the video this morning. So Kevin, if you would, please show the video at this time.
Good morning. My name is Susan Granzella, and I am the chair of California Contractor State License Board. CSLB currently licenses more than 283,000 contractors in California, and not enough of them are women. I'm a public member of the board and a staunch protector of consumers. I'm a former executive of a financial services company, but I have a strong interest in the vital role the construction industry plays. I believe we have a significant opportunity to increase diversity and the role of women within the construction industry, and that's why we're all here today. I would like to mention a milestone for CSLB in 2021. For the first time since the board was founded in 1929, the 3 officer positions on our 15-person board are held by women. Progress. This past year, CSLB has continued to reach out to different communities, and this includes the effort led by our Vice Chair, Mary Teichert, the President and License Qualifier for Teichert, Inc., one of the largest construction companies in Northern California. Mary and board member Jim Ruane serve on our advisory committee, whose goal is to increase the participation of women in the construction industry. Earlier this year, Mary worked with North State Building Industry Association and the California Capitol Women's Business Center to conduct a 3-part virtual event aimed at getting more women involved in the construction industry. Presentations focused on how to get a license, how to start a construction business, and how to build the skills and team you need to successfully run a construction business. These webinars were well received and successful, but we want to do more. I look forward to hearing from this group today on what CSLB can do and how we can help. I am excited to hear the ideas that come out of the conference, and I encourage you to reach out to my board for any assistance you may need. For those of you who want more information on getting a license, CSLB conducts a 2-hour License to Build workshop webinar on the first Friday of every month. During the workshop, the nuts and bolts of getting a license are explained, and there's an entire section where we answer specific questions from the participants. Starting in 2022, we will hold the same workshop in Spanish on the 3rd Friday of each month. I encourage all of you to check out the CSLB website for detailed information about licensing, consumer protection, and the construction industry in California. Thank you all for your participation in this very important effort, and I can't wait to work with you to improve our industry. Thank you again.
So back to business. The next item on what I'm supposed to ask is, are there any board members who would like to comment on any of the items we just covered? Okay, seeing,
Hey, Susan, I just wanted to second the appreciation for leading that discussion. I think that's terrific. It's a good cause, and I'm really glad you were able to represent the board that way. So thank you.
thank you. Thank you. The staff was very helpful when we put that together very quickly, and I'd like to call out the appreciation for public affairs and specifically to Amy Lawrence for helping me with that. Shelley, are there any public comments for these agenda items here?
I am not seeing anything in the chat, the Q&A, or any hand raises at this time.
Very good. So now we are moving on to item D, legislation. And we're moving on to section D, the legislative division portion of our agenda. I will lead the discussion on agenda item D1, and then we will turn it over to legislative division chair Jim Ruane to lead the board's discussion on the agenda items D2 and D3. Legislation agenda item D1 is a review, discussion, and possible action by the board to initiate the rulemaking process pursuant to the Administrative Procedures Act, which proposes to amend our 4 regulations under Title 16 of the California Code of Regulations. That would be sections 810, 831, 832.1, and 832.46. This agenda item memorializes in regulation the action the board took on July 27th, 2021. At that meeting, the board moved and voted to rescind all prior staff determinations that a C46 licensee may install battery energy storage systems, or BESS, as incidental and supplemental work, and adopted UC Berkeley's recommendation to preclude the C46 solar contractor from installing BESS in any setting. On September 23rd, 2021, the California Solar and Storage Association, CALSA, filed a petition for writ of mandate and complaint in the San Francisco Superior Court on the ground that CSLB did not comply with the Administrative Procedures Act, APA, when it moved to preclude the C46 from BESS installation without going through the formal rulemaking process. Staff have prepared the draft regulatory language on page 13 of your board packet, and that mirrors in regulation the board's July 27th, 2021 policy decision. Staff requests board authorization to commence the regulatory rulemaking process under Administrative Procedures Act regarding the permissible scope of work by C46 licensees related to the battery energy solar systems. However, before we begin discussion on this item, I would like to update the board about 2 meetings board member Mary Teichert, CSLB staff, and I had on November 22nd, 2021. The first meeting was with CALSA, and the second was with representatives of the National Electrical Contractor Association and International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. The meetings were a good faith opportunity for CSLB to hear from each respective group regarding their positions on the proposed regulatory language in the board's packet on page 13. Board member Teichert and I believe the parties effectively presented their positions. CALSA presented alternative regulatory language for the board's consideration, which was distributed to board members last week. The alternative language would authorize C46 installation of batteries of up to 1 megawatt hour in capacity when paired with solar photovoltaic device or devices. What is it? Voltaic? Thank you. I have not said that word. Device or devices when located on a customer property. On the other hand, representatives of the National Electrical Contractor Association and International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers expressed support for the draft regulatory text contained in the board packet. With that said, I would like to propose 2 options for the board to consider today. Option number 1, The board may make a motion to approve the proposed text as presented in the board packet and authorize staff to commence the regulatory rulemaking process in compliance with the APA. The motion should be subject to the following conditions. 1, staff is directed to evaluate whether an additional update to the UC Labor Center report regarding its workforce and assumptions is needed, and whether the proposed regulation will be subject to the California Environmental Quality Act review. 2, if staff determines that an update is needed or the proposed regulation would be subject to a California Environmental Quality Act review, staff is directed to return to the board with a recommendation on how to proceed. 3, if staff determines that no update is needed and that the proposed regulation would not be subjected to CEQA review, staff would cause to be published a notice of proposed action, which would provide CSLB 1 year to complete the regulatory rulemaking. The public, including any industry, right now, and that the public, including any industry associations, would have 45 days to comment on the proposed text. Excuse me for a moment. On this proposed paragraph, it is included in option 1. Jason, counsel?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good, thank you, because there were some discussions about that. Thank you for the clarification. The public, including any industry associations, would have 45 days to comment on the proposed text, and the staff would hold a public hearing if requested. If the board receives comments during the 45-day period that recommend changes to the proposed text, those comments and any proposed modifications to the regulations would be brought back before the board, and the board may decide to modify the regulation text. If the board decides to modify the regulations, the public will be provided with an additional 15 days in which to comment on the modified regulation text. Once the board approves final regulation text, the regulatory package will be submitted to the Office of Administrative Law for review and approval. Now, that is option number 1 that I mentioned. Option number 2 is the board may elect not to move forward with the proposed regulation text today. A possible motion may include referring this matter to the board's legislative committee. This will provide further opportunity for staff to collect additional stakeholder input and develop alternative regulatory language that may be acceptable to both the solar and electrical stakeholders. This would require further meetings with industry representatives and would result in draft regulatory language being brought back before the full board at a future meeting for consideration and approval to commence the rulemaking process. Depending on the success of those efforts, the stakeholders could reach a common ground on the proposed language of the regulations. In a moment, I will ask if there is a motion. As everyone is aware, there is a staff recommendation that is in the packet. However, as always, any member of the board is welcome to make an alternative motion. So for option number 1, staff recommendation, and I will read it, is approve the proposed regulatory text for California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Sections 810, 831, 832.1, and 832.46, subject to the following conditions. Staff is directed to evaluate whether an additional update to the UC Berkeley Labor Center report regarding its workforce assumptions is needed and whether the proposed regulation will be subject to California Environmental Quality Act review. Second, if staff determines that an update is needed or the proposed regulation would be subject to the CEQA review, staff is directed to return to the board with a recommendation on how to proceed. And the third bullet under this option is if staff determines that no update is needed and the proposed regulation would not be subject to CEQA review, the registrar is authorized to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process, making any non-substantive changes to the text and/or rulemaking package as needed throughout the process. And if approved by the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency, set the matter for a hearing if preferred or requested. That is the language of the motion for option number 1, and I will now read the motion for option number 2. It is shorter. The option number 2, the motion for option number 2 is to first refer this matter to the board's legislative committee. Second, direct staff to collect additional stakeholder input. And third, develop alternative regulatory language that may be acceptable to both the solar and electrical stakeholders. So with that being said, that's for the option 1 and 2 and the text of the motions 1 and 2. I will ask for board comments, and I do believe, calling on Mary, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you very much, Susan. So as Susan mentioned, I had the opportunity to participate with her in a couple of conversations that included CSLB staff and attorneys with these industry stakeholders last week. And I'd like to make a motion for option 2, which is to refer this to the board's legislative committee to develop alternative regulatory language based on additional stakeholder input that may be acceptable to both solar and electrical industry stakeholders. The reason I'm making this is that the dialogue, the plain conversations made it clear that we have common interests across all the parties here. The safety of consumers is paramount for everyone, driven by the competent installers doing this work. It's also true that support for small contractors, especially women and minority-owned contractors, is a shared goal of IBEW, NECA, CALSA, and NECA, CALSA, and the CSLB. All of us want small and women-owned minority contractors to be successful. And then finally, all of us support the state's goals on alternative energy. So those common things being the case, there did seem to be a glimmer of light at the end of the compromise tunnel. And I know there's some exhaustion with this process, which has been underway for a long time, which was evident also in our discussions in July. But I believe that if we can set aside our personal feelings of weariness, especially for some folks that have been literally working on this for years, and invest the time in just one more round of input, we have the potential to generate a solution that preserves the important priorities of safety, safe installation, and also allows for hundreds of capable small women and minority-owned contractors to stay in business. So I think that could be an outcome of option 2, which is simply to ask for one more round of input, referring this to the legislative committee to develop some alternative regulatory language that could be acceptable to both solar and electrical stakeholders. So with that in mind, I'd like to make the motion for option number 2 as Susan outlined.
Second.
Thank you. And Mary has made the motion. I heard a second. Would that be Mr. Delatorre?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Board member Dave Delatorre has made a second. And now we would like to ask for board comments at this time.
This is Rodney Kobos. On option 1, does it allow for stakeholder input during the rulemaking process?
And
Mr. Kobos, during the 45-day comment period, both the solar and electrical industries will be afforded the opportunity to submit any public comments during that time period. So the answer to your question is yes.
One thing I want to chime in and just make sure my
Thank you.
understanding is correct is that it sounds like both routes have some input alternatives. It sounds like the difference is whether we're developing language that includes them from the output. So there's a chance in my mind that option 2 could be faster.
Do we have any additional board comments?
Yeah, this is Johnny. We've been through this. We've been on this wagon for over a year. We've had public input. We've done everything that we need to do. We've asked the parties to see if they could come up with something. Nothing was ever done of it. We've continued to have long meetings. It seems that, right here at the end, all of a sudden, one more meeting. It just seems like a stall for time to me. There's no reason we can't go with option one and allow the parties to continue to meet. And if they do come up with language that they can agree on, then we can take that action. I'm not in favor of this motion. I think that we're just putting ourselves in a position of stalling this out and continuing to take board time on this over the next 2 years and then start the process then. Just seems to me we ought to go ahead and can start with rulemaking, and if the parties agree to something, then we can have it, rather than start all over, 6 months from now or a year from now when the parties can't agree. Just my opinion.
I have a ton of respect for how much time you've already put in on this, Johnny. I know it's been years, and frankly, before I joined the board, that this whole thing started. I think the thing that struck me in these dialogues is that everybody's aware how long it's taken, and so everybody seems pretty willing to really hear each other out and come up with something that's constructive. So that's what made me want to take one more shot at alternative regulatory language. Option 2 precludes getting back to what you're talking about. I think if option 2 doesn't work, we can still be right back here next meeting with the disparate pieces we've been at so far.
Can we put, Mary, I appreciate the hard work that you have done on it. Like I say, the board was doing this before you came on the board, and it continues to be our largest time sucker. So, can we put a time frame on this and say the parties need to agree within, however many months, or we will continue with rulemaking? Can we put an end to this discussion at some point? We have the study that we spent taxpayer dollars on. We've done all the things we need to do to start rulemaking. If the parties can't agree, I'm just not in favor of having this go on for years.
Timeframes sound pretty good. Does CSLB staff, do any of you have suggestions on, could we have a friendly amendment to put a time frame on how long it would take us to develop this alternative language?
Yes, this is Dave Fote. If option number 2 was to pass, our goal would be to conduct stakeholder meetings in December and the early part of January, with the goal of having a legislative committee meeting around the middle of February. So then we could have the legislative committee meeting and present what the legislative committee recommendation is to the full board at the March board meeting.
Do you think it would be fair to say this motion would be that we would develop alternative regulatory language to be presented at the March board meeting? So that would kind of address Johnny's question with, if it wasn't ready to present in March, then we would go back to option A then potentially.
That would certainly work well for me. Yes.
What do you think, Johnny?
Yeah, that works for me. I just don't want this to continue through everybody's terms and, continue to go for another 6 years. This needs to be handled, expediently. So I'm okay with that.
Are there any other board member comments?
Yes, this is Diana Love. I didn't see my raised hand button, so I'm just chiming in. I also agree with board member Tykert on option number 2. This started way before I came on the board as well. I've read and seen a lot of information that has come across in the last few days, and I have a concern about contractors and businesses closing, which could possibly lead to people becoming homeless. I do understand that there have been contractors who have performed the work and there has not been any errors, although we are talking about the future as well. But our job is the consumer protection. And I would like to see the two industries come together and have an opportunity to find common ground. I don't want to see people out of work. I do understand the safety that is coming from the electrical workers, potential fires, the installation being done correctly. So we have options, we have things to consider on both ends. So again, I would like to see us come together. And I know we're talking about stakeholders meetings, but I would like to just throw something out there to consider. Have we ever thought about having a electrical inspector? Just like someone who inspects jobs when homes are built, that goes around to inspect the work that a C-46 contractor would do. So that's just something to throw out there and think about. But again, I support option number 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other board comments at this time?
This is the moderator. I do see Member Galarz's hand up. And just for those who don't know, if you hover your mouse over your name, you will see a small hand icon appear next to your name. If you click on that icon, that will raise your hand, and then clicking on it again will lower it.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Shelley.
Totally in favor of the motion. After, clearly I've been on the board less than a year. And so with all due respect to everybody that's done fantastic work, getting my head around the issues and understanding clearly the impacts to our communities of formerly incarcerated employees and the pathway to certifications to be able to do this work versus the work that they've been doing. Clearly understanding that consumer protection and safety are paramount. So I look forward to participating to try and come to some consensus where both safety, industry, and contractors all can come to a fair and reasonable consensus. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Galarza. Are there any other comments from the board?
Yes, Steve Pinelli, I have a comment. I'd like to go on record saying that I agree with the option number 2, but as long as Johnny's request for an amendment is attached, I think that we need to get to an end result, and having a deadline of having an end result would make it a lot easier.
So could we amend the motion per that Steve's comment and Johnny's to say develop alternative regulatory language that may be acceptable to both the solar and electrical stakeholders to be presented at the March 2022 board meeting? Can that be the whole motion now? And do we need David to second that one?
I would like to, this is Johnny, I would like to add to that, yeah, I like what you said, Mary, but I would also like to say that if the language is not accepted, if mutual language cannot be accepted, then we go to rulemaking. We go to option 1 there. Let's just put an end to this. They either come up with language or we're automatically going to rulemaking in March.
Board Member Tykert, do you have any objections to Mr. Simpson's amendment?
I don't think so. I think that's where we would be. So
Board Member De La Torre, do you have any objections?
Not at all.
Okay.
If I may also add a comment. I've been on this board for some time now and have been involved in this process. I did second the motion. I agree with Board Member Simpson as to a deadline, a time frame. But seeing the magnitude as that this decision, that this board's decisions have on our industry, I just think we should we're obligated to exhaust good faith efforts. So that's why I support the motion.
Thank you.
So, sorry, this is Board Member Michael Mark. So to clarify, from what I heard in the friendly amendments, it was the option 2 with the amendment of proposed rulemaking as proposed by the next board meeting, and then having the stakeholders try to meet and propose additional language? Was that the amendment as its whole?
The amendment, I think, as intended, was to say that we're going to refer it to the legislative committee and direct staff to collect additional input between now and March to develop alternative regulatory language that may be acceptable to all stakeholders. So the main addition is to say March, and then also to Johnny's point, what would the consequence be if we did not get this done would be to move on to rulemaking, which was, I think, his comment there. I don't understand, and maybe some of the CSLB staff could help us figure out if that's part of the motion or if that's just a comment on what would the agenda be in March, would be to say either review this language or approve the rulemaking. Maybe that's the March agenda, I'm not sure.
Mary,
Jason Hurtado, would you like to comment on that? So it'd be my understanding that what we would do is have the stakeholder meetings and then see if we can't find some mutually agreed upon regulatory language. In the event that we can't, then we would put together the best language we can with the facts that are available to submit to the legislative committee, who would then review it. And if they approve, they would be making that fully formed motion to the full board. But the idea would be, by the board meeting that's tentatively scheduled for the last week of March, we would have proposed regulatory rulemaking language that came from the legislative committee to the full board. But Jason Hurtado, do you want to add anything to that?
Thank you, Registrar Fote. I think my understanding would be that if both stakeholder sides would fail to reach an agreement on proposed text, then come March, the board would vote on the original proposed text as it was presented today.
this is Johnny. That would be my amendment, yes.
Board Member Tykert and Board Member De La Torre, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so we need to have a recitation of that. But first, if there are any other board member comments at this time.
I do have my hand raised. This is Board Member Love.
Mhm.
I would like to know that March deadline language, is that a hard and fast rule that we're making? Because if we are still, if we're there and have started conversation but are not quite there, is that can that be extended if it is not March, or are we just going to automatically come to a ruling of option one? And I'm asking that because of all the lawsuits. I think we have to do whatever we need to do. I understand that people are tired of this going on, but pending lawsuits and different things that are going on, I think we have to leave ourselves open to continue a negotiation if we're almost there but not quite there, and not put a hard and fast rule that in March, if we're not completely satisfied, we will vote for option one. So I'd like to know if that is open to consideration to extend time if needed.
This is Johnny again. As the maker of the amendment, I think we need a hard and fast deadline. If they are close or something like that, I think that we can consider it, but I would not like to have it as part of the motion. We can always do what we want to do as a board with a vote, but if we do not, if one side or the other just stalls it out thinking they're going to get more time, then let's put an end to this. Let's force the two parties to get in a room, do the hard and fast negotiations, get it done, and we can help them. Otherwise, we will have to settle it and do it fairly soon. So my opinion is I like the way it is, and I like the hard and fast March motion.
Yeah. Board Member Love, your comment is duly noted. I think that's something that the board members could consider in March. But the maker of the motion, Board Member Tykert, and the second, Board Member De La Torre, were in support of Board Member Simpson's amendment. So,
Okay,
okay, thank you.
thank you. Long as it's duly noted.
Thank you. All right. Again, any additional board comments at this time? Seeing and hearing none. As we discussed earlier, we're going to ask for public comment. And as we discussed earlier, we are limiting the public comment to 3 minutes per person. So Shelley, can you please check for public comments?
Yes, we have a comment that was submitted through the chat from John Bardner. He had to leave because he had another meeting. I will read his comments. Summary is, Enphase is one of the largest suppliers of residential solar and ESS. Enphase installers commission between 50 and 100 ESS systems per day. ESS training is available online and in person at their offices. And that's at university.enphaseenergy.com. 4,340 have been trained year to date, approximately 200 per month on an ongoing basis. Design training is 2.12 hours, install training 7.5 hours, sales training 4.6 hours. Training qualifies for NAB CEP CEUs. ESS commissioning requires use of our installer toolkit. That's a smartphone app. ITK ESS module is not enabled until a company has at least one individual who has completed both design and install training. Each installer must complete installer training in order to enable ITK ESS module. We make no distinction between C10, C46, or electricians. And next we have some hand raises. First is Andrew Tanner. I've sent a request to unmute your microphone. As a reminder, you'll have 3 minutes. You'll need to click the unmute me button that appears at your end. All right, I will circle back to Andrew. We'll move on to calling user number 2 is how this individual is identified. Sending a request to unmute your microphone.
Good morning, board. This is Damon Franz. I'm a policy manager for Tesla. In addition to the electric cars you see on the road, Tesla designs, manufactures, and installs the Powerwall. It's a 5 kilowatt, 13.5 kilowatt hour battery meant to provide energy backup to a single family home. And to date, Tesla and our channel partners, who include both C46 and C10 contractors licensed by the board, have deployed about 80,000 batteries at about 46,000 homes in California without any safety incidents we are aware of. And so we just want to point out that given the lack of safety incidents, we're skeptical that a change is warranted, and certainly don't feel that there's an impending safety issue that warrants a rush to change the current regime. I just want to talk a little bit about the safety features we employ for the installation, both on installer training and product design. And just want to make clear that any contractor wishing to install the Powerwall, we require them to go through a very rigorous onboarding and training process before we provide them with the product. So this means that we won't provide batteries to any contractor that we don't do thorough background safety check on, and also put through a fairly rigorous installation training, both for the contractor and at least one person on every installation crew. And that includes 4 hours of course material on all aspects of operation and installation of the product, including overview, design, technical specifications, mounting the battery, wiring the battery, metering and monitoring, and commissioning. And these exams, these courses include exams on 12 different topics that the installers have to pass in order to complete the training. And when we introduce a new product, we update our training and require all of our channel partners to be retrained and retested. And then I just want to note that the battery itself is designed to be inherently safe and includes safety features that would minimize the likelihood of fire and other dangers, even if it's not installed properly. For example, the battery and the inverter compartment are hermetically sealed and rated to IP67, which means they can survive being submerged in a meter of water for up to 30 minutes. And it's also not possible to touch the live cells or be exposed to high voltage during the install or afterwards.
30 seconds.
And, you know, I'm sorry, am I at time?
You have 30 seconds left.
Okay, great. So I just want to conclude by saying that simply holding a C10 license doesn't in and of itself indicate a contractor or the workers are qualified to deploy a C46 and we feel, or a BESS system. And we feel the C46 contractor and their workforce, you know, can be as competent or more based on their, you know, their own individual experience. So I appreciate the, you know, the move that the board has made today to try to seek a solution between the parties and look forward to working through that process.
Thank you. And I'll circle back to Andrew. Andrew, I'm sending you that request again to unmute your microphone.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can.
Perfect. Good morning. My name is Andrew Tanner. I'm VP of Strategy and Growth at Yotta Energy. Yotta Energy is an innovative energy storage manufacturer based in Austin, Texas. We are opposed to regulations on the agenda today and ask that you work out alternative language that preserves the pathway for C46 contractors to install distributed solar and energy storage systems. Yotta manufactures an energy storage technology that is a modular 1 kilowatt-hour battery pack. Our battery installs beneath the solar modules in between the solar module and the inverter. A 20 kilowatt-hour energy storage system using Yotta's technology therefore consists of 20 individual batteries beneath 20 solar modules. Our technology is inherently embedded within the solar system and is installed concurrent with the solar up on the roof. Each ESS unit has 2 pairs of MC4 connectors, one pair that connects to the solar module and the other to the inverter. The proposed restriction to C46 contractors would imply that they are qualified to connect MC4 connectors between solar modules, but are unqualified to connect MC4 connectors to Yotta's batteries, which is arbitrary and unworkable. Further, it would be impractical for a C46 contractor to do the solar installation and a C10 contractor to connect the solar modules to our batteries. Again, our batteries are a unique design. They are small and fit underneath solar modules up on the roof. Our technology highlights the shortcomings of this proposed regulation.